Okay, so you think Coca-Cola sells a drink. You see the red cans in every gas station, every grocery store, every restaurant on the planet. The vending machines in airport terminals, the fountain dispensers in McDonald's. You figure they make syrup, they put it in a bottle, they charge $1.50, and somewhere in the middle of that transaction, billions of dollars materialize. Simple, obvious. A sugar-water empire. Here's what's actually happening. The liquid inside that bottle costs somewhere between 2 and 4 cents to manufacture. The packaging, aluminum, label, plastic cap, adds another 10 to 15 cents. Total physical cost, under 20 cents. Retail price, $1.50 to $2.50 depending on where you buy it. That gap, the chasm between what this product costs and what you willingly pay, is not an accident. It is the entire point, because Coca-Cola is not really in the beverage business. It never was. The story starts in Atlanta in 1886 with a pharmacist named John Stith Pemberton. Pemberton was a Confederate veteran dealing with a morphine addiction from Civil War injuries, trying to develop a remedy that would ease pain and give people energy without the legal problems that came with alcohol during Atlanta's temperance movement. What he produced was a syrup made from coca leaf and cola nut extracts, mixed with carbonated water. He carried it down the street to Jacob's Pharmacy, where it sold for 5 cents a glass as a tonic for headaches and fatigue. Pemberton struggled. He was sick and undercapitalized. A pharmacist named Asa Griggs Candler began acquiring stakes in the formula and trademark, eventually consolidating full ownership for $2,300. He incorporated the Coca-Cola Company in 1892. Then he made the decision that changed everything. In 1899, Candler sold exclusive nationwide bottling rights to 2 attorneys for $1. $1. His reasoning? Soft drinks were a fountain business. He didn't want to build bottling plants or manage delivery fleets. He wanted to make concentrate and let someone else handle the rest. That decision wasn't a mistake. Without realizing it, Candler invented one of the most profitable corporate architectures in business history. The drink wasn't the real invention. The business model was, the first thing you need to understand is that Coca-Cola is not selling you a beverage. It is selling you convenience, habit, emotion, and brand identity, and using a beverage as the physical delivery mechanism for all four. Standard economic theory assumes consumers make rational choices based on price, quality, and product attributes. In practice, fast-moving consumer goods like Coca-Cola operate almost entirely on what behavioral economists call System 1 decision-making, the fast, automatic, subconscious mental shortcut your brain takes when it doesn't want to do analytical work. When you're standing in a gas station at 2 in the afternoon and your hand reaches for a Coke, you are not evaluating alternatives. You are following a groove worn into your decision-making by years of repetition. The combination of sugar, caffeine, cold temperature, and carbonation creates a sensory feedback loop the brain learns to anticipate. The distribution network, placing the product within arm's reach at millions of retail locations globally, eliminates friction between the impulse and the purchase. The advertising ties consumption to feelings of happiness and celebration. And the brand identity converts a commodity into something with psychological weight. By the time a consumer reaches for a Coca-Cola, they are not buying a drink. They are buying cognitive comfort. And cognitive comfort is extraordinarily resistant to price increases, competitor products, and rational comparison shopping. People buy familiarity far more than flavor. In 2004, a team of neuroscientists at Baylor College of Medicine conducted an experiment that should have permanently changed how everyone thinks about brand value. Researchers ran blind and brand-cued taste tests between Coca-Cola and Pepsi, scanning participants' brains with fMRI machines throughout. In the blind tests, subjects drinking from unlabeled cups, preferences split roughly 50-50. Both drinks triggered similar reward responses in the brain region that processes taste. Neurologically, the two liquids looked nearly identical. Then they changed one variable. They told subjects which cup contained Coca-Cola before they drank from it. Suddenly, over 73% preferred the Coca-Cola sample, even when the liquid inside the labeled cup was chemically identical to the unlabeled one. The fMRI scans revealed why. Seeing the Coca-Cola brand triggered additional activation in the hippocampus, responsible for retrieving cultural memories and learned associations, and the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, involved in top-down emotional processing. The brand wasn't just influencing preference. It was physically altering how the brain processed the taste signal itself. A competitor could produce a chemically indistinguishable liquid tomorrow. It would not taste as good to people who grew up drinking the red can. Consumer preference is constructed in the mind, not on the palate. Branding literally changes perceived taste. For over a century, corporate narrative has held that Coca-Cola's dominance is rooted in a secret recipe, internally coded Merchandise 7X. locked inside a vault in Atlanta and accessible by only 2 senior executives simultaneously. From a chemistry standpoint, this is theater. Modern analytical techniques, gas chromatography, mass spectrometry, nuclear magnetic resonance spectroscopy, can reverse engineer a beverage's chemical composition down to trace compounds measured in parts per million. The formula's legal protection comes from trade secret law rather than patents, which is smart. Patents require public disclosure and expire after 20 years. A trade secret theoretically lasts forever, but even if a competitor perfectly replicated the formula, they would still fail. The formula is not Coca-Cola's competitive moat. Its real moat is built from 3 pillars that took over a century to construct. Distribution reach covering more than 200 countries, marketing infrastructure spending over $4 billion annually to maintain consumer saliency, and a global operational scale that makes competing against it economically brutal. The secret formula primarily functions as a brilliant narrative device. A story that keeps the brand mysterious, the media interested, and consumers feeling like they're in on something special. The vault is a marketing investment. One of the most cost-effective ones the company has ever made. This is where Coca-Cola's real business model becomes visible, and it's almost nothing like what most people imagine. The Coca-Cola Company, traded on the NYSE under ticker KO, does not own the factories where your Coke is bottled. It does not operate the truck fleets that deliver it to your store. It does not manage the warehouses or the retail restocking routes. What it actually does is more elegant. It manufactures concentrated flavor syrup at a small number of centralized facilities, sells that concentrate to independent regional bottling partners, and collects a check. Those bottling partners, companies like Coca-Cola Consolidated in North America, Coca-Cola Euro-Pacific Partners covering Europe and the Asia-Pacific, and Coca-Cola FEMSA in Latin America, handle everything downstream. They buy the concentrate, mix it with local water and sweeteners, fill the cans and bottles, operate the delivery fleets, and manage retail relationships. The financial architecture this creates is striking. Concentrate manufacturing generates gross profit margins exceeding 60%, with operating margins between 28 and 32%. Meanwhile, the bottling partners, taking all the capital risk, running all the trucks, employing all the labor, earn operating margins in the 8 to 12% range. When aluminum prices spike, the cost hits the bottler's income statement. When diesel fuel costs rise, the bottler absorbs it. Coca-Cola owns the recipe, the brand, and the high-margin cash flows. Everyone else owns the infrastructure. This is what asset-light means in practice. The franchise bottling model allows Coca-Cola to scale globally without the capital expenditures that would normally accompany that scale. Maintaining thousands of bottling facilities and delivery fleets across 200 countries would require tens of billions of dollars in recurring capital spending. Equipment upgrades, facility maintenance, fleet replacement, labor costs. The Coca-Cola Company, by transferring those requirements to regional partners, keeps its own capital expenditure around 2 to 4% of net revenues. Its bottling partners, bearing the actual operational load, spend 5 to 8% or more. The parent company's return on equity consistently exceeds 35% as a result. What makes this architecture particularly durable is that it also transfers local risk to local operators. A bottling partner in Mexico understands Mexican retail dynamics and regulation far better than any Atlanta-based executive could. A partner in Nigeria brings route networks into urban markets and remote rural areas that Coca-Cola would spend billions trying to replicate from scratch. The franchise model converts local expertise into a competitive advantage, without requiring KO to pay for developing that expertise in-house. Through what the company calls refranchising, systematically selling bottling operations back to independent operators, Coca-Cola has spent the past decade shedding capital-intensive assets from its balance sheet and sharpening its returns further. The operational objective Coca-Cola set for its distribution network is one of the most audacious in business history. Place a Coca-Cola within an arm's reach desire for every person on Earth, not every person who wants one, every person who might want one. That objective, pursued through decades of investment and partnership development, produced a distribution machine now covering millions of retail outlets, restaurants, stadiums, airports, transit hubs, and village markets across more than 200 countries. There are parts of the world where clean drinking water is difficult to access, but a Coca-Cola is not. This matters financially because distribution density and consumer demand are a self-reinforcing flywheel. Being everywhere creates the impulse trigger. A consumer who sees a Coke cooler at checkout reaches for one they weren't planning to buy. That impulse purchase density justifies adding more distribution points. More points generate more volume. More volume improves delivery economics, making it profitable to service increasingly remote locations that a new entrant could never reach economically. In emerging markets, Coca-Cola built micro-distribution centers, locally owned hubs using handcarts, bicycles, and small trucks to navigate high-density urban alleyways and rural roads that standard delivery trucks cannot reach. This last-mile infrastructure didn't just expand the market, it locked it up. A competing brand challenging Coca-Cola in Lagos or Nairobi isn't just fighting a brand. It's fighting a distribution network that took 70 years to build. Inside every grocery store and convenience outlet, a quiet war is happening that consumers never see. Shelf space, specifically eye-level positions, end-cap displays, and refrigerated coolers near checkout, is finite, intensely contested real estate. Coca-Cola has spent decades engineering control over that real estate. The mechanism is called direct store delivery. Rather than sending products through a retailer's central distribution warehouse, Coca-Cola's bottling partners deliver directly to individual store locations. Their personnel drop off product, build promotional displays, and manage shelf inventory directly, ensuring full stock during peak shopping windows and visual display quality that store staff rarely replicate. When Coca-Cola personnel control the shelf build, they control the position. Eye-level placement, end cap exposure. The cold cooler next to the checkout counter that intercepts impulse decisions precisely when a consumer is waiting to pay. Research consistently shows eye-level shelf placement can lift product sales by 30% or more compared to lower shelves. Beyond placement, Coca-Cola places proprietary branded refrigerators in retail locations at no charge to the store owner. The catch, an exclusivity clause that forbids competitor products from entering that cooler. A retailer who accepts the free equipment has effectively handed Coca-Cola control of the cold impulse purchase category in that store. And then there are exclusive pouring contracts, multi-year agreements locking an entire restaurant chain, university campus, or sports venue to Coca-Cola products exclusively. One contract secures a channel entirely, shutting out every competitor from every location in that network simultaneously. If you're getting value from this breakdown, it would genuinely help the channel if you liked the video and subscribed. It only takes a second and it makes a real difference. If virtually every adult on the planet knows what Coca-Cola is, why does it spend over $4 billion every year on advertising? What is another $4 billion actually buying? Everything the mistake is thinking advertising exists to create awareness. For an established brand like Coca-Cola, awareness is not the objective, saliency is. Saliency means being the automatic, first response answer when a consumer experiences a purchase trigger. Not "I've heard of Coca-Cola," but when I'm thirsty, my hand reaches for Coke before I've consciously decided. Human memory decays. Consumers are not loyal in the way brands imagine. They choose from a small consideration set in each purchase moment, shaped by what's recently occupied mental space. A brand that stops advertising doesn't maintain its position while saving money. It creates a vacuum that competitors immediately fill. Additionally, the majority of Coca-Cola's volume comes from light buyers, consumers who purchase the product once every week or two rather than daily. These light buyers are disproportionately influenced by advertising exposure. $4 billion in media spend is largely the cost of repeatedly recruiting those light buyers into the next purchase cycle. And there is the deterrent effect. Maintaining that level of advertising spend establishes a barrier most potential entrants cannot clear. A challenger brand doesn't just face the cost of building a product. It faces the cost of competing against $4 billion of consumer mind occupation per year. That reality alone keeps most serious competitors out. Notice what Coca-Cola's marketing almost never discusses. The drink itself. You don't see advertisements focused on ingredient quality or cost efficiency. You don't see comparative taste claims. You see the 1971 campaign where hundreds of young people from different cultures stand on a hilltop singing together. You see the 1930s holiday illustrations by artist Haddon Sundblom that gave modern culture its definitive visual image Santa Claus. In red and white, by no coincidence. You see the Open Happiness platform positioning a Coke as an accessible emotional reward available to anyone, anytime. You see Olympic sponsorships and FIFA World Cup campaigns anchoring the brand to shared human achievement. This is not accidental sentimentality. It is a calculated strategy to keep the brand entirely outside the domain of rational evaluation. The moment Coca-Cola's marketing focuses on a product attribute, taste, ingredients, price, it invites comparison. It gives a competitor a specific claim to challenge. It encourages the consumer to think rather than feel. And thinking leads to an inconvenient question. Am I paying $2 for something that costs 3 cents to make? Selling happiness sidesteps that question entirely. Consumers are not evaluating the economics of liquid sugar. They are buying a feeling, nostalgia, warmth, celebration that the brand spent over a century associating with the product. One of the most overlooked dimensions of Coca-Cola's financial machine is what happens when you raise the price of something that sells in volumes measured in hundreds of billions of individual units per year. Coca-Cola sells approximately 30 billion unit cases annually. One unit case equals 24 8-ounce servings. That's roughly 720 billion individual servings per year. Now apply a price increase of 1 cent per serving. 720 billion servings multiplied by 1 cent equals $7.2 billion in additional annual revenue. And because the physical manufacturing cost of the concentrate doesn't change when the price increases, the vast majority of that incremental revenue flows directly to the gross profit line. Coca-Cola doesn't need to sell more product to grow profit substantially. It needs to raise prices by amounts so small that individual consumers barely register them. A Coke that costs $1.49 this year and $1.52 next year is not something anyone stops buying over. But at global scale, that 3-cent increase is worth billions in additional profit. This is pricing power in practice. Low price elasticity, consumer indifference to small nominal price changes on low-cost impulse products, converts into extraordinary profit leverage at sufficient scale. And when input costs rise, Coca-Cola passes them downstream in increments too small for any individual consumer to notice or resist. When a restaurant operator runs Coca-Cola concentrate through a fountain dispenser, what happens to the economics is almost surreal. Syrup and concentrate cost for a 16-ounce fountain pour, 1 to 3 cents. Add the cup, lid, straw, and ice. Total input cost reaches 13 to 25 cents. Menu price, $2 to $3. Gross margin, 80 to 90%. For comparison, a burger or sandwich might generate margins in the 20 to 30% range. A fountain drink generates margins that rival enterprise software. The relationship between Coca-Cola and McDonald's, formalized by a handshake between Ray Kroc and Coca-Cola's Waddy Pratt in 1955, has lasted over 70 years and represents the single largest restaurant account in Coca-Cola's global portfolio. Coca-Cola dedicates an entire corporate division to the McDonald's relationship, delivers syrup in temperature-controlled stainless steel tanks rather than standard plastic bags, and enforces precise water filtration standards to maintain consistency across tens of thousands of locations worldwide. In return, McDonald's serves Coca-Cola exclusively. The partnership creates a self-reinforcing loop. McDonald's value meals drive enormous beverage attachment rates, generating massive syrup volume, while Coca-Cola's presence across tens of thousands of McDonald's locations reinforces consumer familiarity with the brand at one of the highest traffic food service environments on Earth. The Cola Wars, the decades-long marketing battle between Coca-Cola and PepsiCo that peaked in the 1970s and 1980s. Are usually told as a story of rivalry. Two giants fighting for dominance, one winning, one losing. Market share as the scoreboard. The actual economic story is more interesting than that. Pepsi's Pepsi Challenge, blind taste test campaign, consistently showed consumers preferring Pepsi in unbranded conditions. The campaign landed hard enough that Coca-Cola eventually reformulated its core product, releasing New Coke in 1985. Consumer backlash was immediate and ferocious. The original formula returned within 77 days under the name Coca-Cola Classic. The episode inadvertently demonstrated something powerful. Consumers weren't just attached to the taste. They were emotionally bonded to the product in a way that transcended preference. But here's the structural observation. The Cola Wars framed consumer choice as a binary, Coke or Pepsi. In doing so, they didn't just pit two companies against each other. They systematically marginalized every other competitor in the category. Regional soft drink brands and store-label alternatives found themselves squeezed out of a conversation that two duopolists had redefined as a two-horse race. The rivalry, paradoxically, made both companies stronger by eliminating the competition around them. Starting in the early 2000s, Coca-Cola faced a structural threat no competitor had ever posed: the consumer's own growing concern about what they were drinking. Epidemiological research linking high sugar consumption to obesity and metabolic disease began accumulating. Governments implemented soda taxes. Schools removed sugary drinks from cafeterias. Consumer preferences began shifting, slowly at first, then with increasing momentum. Coca-Cola's response was not to defend the product. It was to transform the portfolio. Significant R&D investment produced Coca-Cola Zero Sugar, formulated to replicate the taste profile of the original without calories to a degree that earlier zero-calorie formulations never achieved. The result retained health-conscious consumers within the brand family. Zero Sugar delivered 14% volume growth in fiscal year 2025. On packaging, Coca-Cola introduced smaller format options. The 7.5-ounce mini can, addressing consumer desires for portion control while delivering a counterintuitive financial benefit. Smaller cans command significantly higher prices per fluid ounce than standard cans, improving gross margin per unit of liquid sold. On the regulatory side, certain regional recipes were reformulated to reduce sugar content just below soda tax thresholds in specific jurisdictions, neutralizing the financial impact without requiring market concessions. The health crisis did not weaken Coca-Cola. It forced product and financial innovation that ultimately made the business more resilient. By the mid-2010s, relying exclusively on carbonated soft drinks in developed markets was a long-term volume saturation problem. Soda consumption per capita in the United States and Western Europe had been declining for years. Whatever direction consumer preferences moved, towards sparkling water, premium dairy, cold coffee, sports hydration, or energy drinks, Coca-Cola would own the leading brand in that category and deliver it through the same distribution machine already reaching millions of retail points globally. The portfolio today reflects that strategy. Fairlife provides premium, high-protein dairy products. Costa Coffee acquired for $5 billion in 2019,